a lot of people, I think they get job satisfaction later in their
Mm-hmm.
careers when they actually have a team of people
Yes.
who are helping and who they can still give input to, really
Yes.
helpful input
Yes.
to. And I feel like the AI relationship is a little bit like that. That is,
Mm-hmm.
it's giving you a lot of useful information, and you still feel like you have something important to add to that
That's right.
equation.
Welcome back to Make Minutes Matter, where we'll be continuing our conversation with Darryl Chiang, who's part of the legal department for Google. In our last conversation, Darryl and I were exploring various aspects of his career. Today, we're going to take that to the next level. It starts with the whole idea of going to school and being trained, and then the practical application when you get in the workplace and how it doesn't quite line up. I mean, they teach you about the job. They don't teach you how to do the job. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
100%. In fact, I feel like law school education, it's almost as if you're in a military school
Mhm.
where they're teaching you to be a general,
Yes.
but your first job is to be a private.
Yes, exactly.
And you're
Mhm.
frustrated because you actually don't know how to dig a foxhole or load your gun properly.
Mhm.
And it's and all that you had been thinking about for the last 3 years were sort of strategic issues.
Yes.
And there's this 10-year chasm between you and when you can apply that knowledge.
Mhm.
And what's interesting to me is I actually think that in today's environment, AI gives people a much uh, shorter runway where they can actually apply their strategic
Yes.
thinking skills much faster because a lot of that infantry work is now being done by the
For
AI.
for them.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the other benefits of it of the AI application, and we'll talk more in depth about AI in just a few minutes, but just right now, I think that it offers an opportunity for someone who's so inclined to start thinking about what does this look like practically. So you can replicate that environment. You set your scenario, you put your context in, and this is what I'm doing. What does this look like? So instead of having to go through the kind of the pain that you went through, there's a way to shorten that cycle somewhat. Now, in the shortening of it, is it better or worse? I don't
Yeah,
know. I
it's a
because
great
the because
question.
the because the life experience, that's a very different, profound interaction with knowledge than you're sitting in front of general counsel in the private firm, and he's giving you the business about the fact that you didn't ask some basic questions. And this is really the piece that I think as a society we have to come to terms with. And that is that human component, that human piece. That was the difference here. The having to be accountable to another person, to have that feeling of, I think I might have disappointed him, or I might have let him down, or I want him to think highly of me. We don't necessarily give that same regard to a large language model. I mean, it's a very different kind of interaction. Can both coexist? Absolutely.
It's such a good question. Yeah, I when I reflect on it, the way I use AI today
Hmm.
is, I'm constantly asking it very, very specific questions. It often gives me very insightful answers,
Hmm.
and then I can follow up with different scenarios,
Yeah. Hmm.
push back on some of the answers, and continue to dig further. It really is like a conversation with
Yeah.
a tireless associate
Yes.
who is continuously giving me more and more information to think about. And interestingly enough, like an associate currently,
Hmm.
I can spot the issues where it's not quite giving me the full picture,
Hmm.
because I've got 30 years of
Experience.
experience,
Yes. Hmm.
and I know enough to know that something's missing or that something's not quite right. Which actually, funny enough, was the relationship I had with my judge.
Hmm.
Was she was depending on me to do a lot of the book related research, but she had a wealth of experience to know whether that's really directionally right
Sure.
and to adjust it if it wasn't.
Mhm.
Um, but what I feel about the interaction with AI right now is that had I had AI when I was at Latham, some of that fear and loneliness might have not been as acute
Mhm.
because part of it was I was afraid to ask questions.
Yes.
But I can actually ask a lot of questions to the
I
AI.
was just going to
Yeah,
bring this point up. That was my second point. So we're so on the same page here. And that is, I think people in general, especially when they're new, when they're in foreign territory, whatever side, that it's hard to ask a question. It's hard to put yourself out there and say you might need help because what are people going to think of me?
that's
Yeah.
right. Well, and the interesting thing about AI is it really hones your skills in terms of asking good
Good
questions.
questions. Yes.
And once you really dig further and you go through this whole almost Socratic process with
Mhm.
the AI, I think actually what it does is it gives you a whole lot of really useful foundational information. And then you can actually narrow down what you're going to ask the Tony Fenwicks of the
Yes,
world, right?
exactly.
And
Mhm.
I would feel less like I was wasting his time. I
Mhm.
might have one targeted question for him
Mhm.
that was an intelligent question that reflected some background knowledge.
Yes.
And I think that that's actually a really huge opportunity
Mhm.
so that it makes our human interactions better and more targeted to
Mhm.
something really useful.
Yeah.
Um, and takes away a lot of the fear that you had because you weren't wasting that senior associate's time just on the basics.
Sure, sure,
You could do your homework, actually.
yeah, and through the process, maybe the sting of not knowing, it just becomes part of the process. So it
Yes.
becomes more normalized.
And it really, I think it refocuses you because you stop assuming that you have to already have known the answer.
Mhm.
It's much more about continuously asking more questions until you get to a point where you feel like, I've got something actionable
Mhm.
or I can make a good decision. And it's really the AI is not making a decision for you. You're still
Yes.
really, you have to think critically about what it's saying. It is literally like somebody who's helping you, but
Mhm.
you're still making the decision. And but I think it's interesting because a lot of people, I think they get job satisfaction later in their
Mhm.
careers when they actually have a team of people
Yes.
who are helping and who they can still give input to, really
Yes.
helpful input to.
Yes.
And I feel like the AI relationship is a little bit like that. That is,
Mhm.
it's giving you a lot of useful information and you still feel like you have something important to add to that
That's right.
equation.
Mhm.
Now, of course, uh, every year, every month, every minute, AI is getting better and better. And some people do claim that um, as early as 2027, it'll be at super intelligence level, and that'll be a different situation where it's smarter than you,
Yeah.
right? But at least in the current state, I feel like we've still got this relationship where it can really be satisfying and
Mhm.
really helpful in the work environment.
But don't you, I mean, going into that, I mean, that the AI platform could be more intelligent than a human being. I mean, in today's world, you encounter that every day. I mean, I don't claim to be the smartest person in the world. There are people that are far more intelligent than I am, and there are people more intelligent than those people, and there are also people that are not quite as smart. So I think that there's an equilibrium out there that exists. So if we have one more source of information that we can tap into, isn't it with the idea that we all get to raise up a little bit?
Well, I think that's right, and I think that actually the thing that comes to my mind most is um, any executive, and like say the president of the United States,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Um, although we've had many presidents who are incredibly intelligent in their own right, there
Mhm.
have also been ones who are not you would never say, "Oh, that person was the smartest or best informed person in the room,"
Mhm.
but that wasn't his role, right? Um, his role was to be counseled by some of the
By the
greatest
cabinet.
experts, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Those people actually had a lot more knowledge
Mhm.
and a lot more, vertical specific experience.
Yes.
But he's the one putting it together and also making some very human decisions,
Yes.
right? There
Mhm.
were some human elements that go beyond just what his cabinet members were talking to him about. And I think it's that synthesizing of the information and adding a kind of human element to it that could continue to be our role.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So the third observation that I had while we were talking about the progression of things up until your first in-house counsel role was just this whole idea of book smarts and street smarts. And we've touched on this a little bit when we talk about the real application of your education. But I mentioned that my dad was a fireman, and I don't know if I shared the story with you or not, but um, I was the first one in my family to go to college. And this was a really big deal. I mean, it was something that both he and my mom really felt strongly about, that this was the way forward. And being a woman, I'm the oldest girl. I was the oldest child and a woman. This was not the norm for where they came from. And so, but it would nonetheless, both of them agreed this is the way forward. We have to let our past be our past, and this is the future. And so he was quite apprehensive that somehow or other, when I started college, that I would become somebody that I'm not, that I would somehow or other become, an intellectual, a snob, someone that was not relatable anymore. And the night before I started, he came into my room. He said, "I need to have a conversation with you." And you don't know my father, but he was a man of very few words. So the fact that this was happening was like a big deal. I said, "Okay, Dad, what's up?" He goes, "Well, listen." He goes, "I just got to tell you, you're going off on your big journey tomorrow." He goes, "So I'm just going to give you this perspective. 'Cause you know, I never went to college." I said, "Yeah, I know, Dad. We've talked about that endlessly." He goes, "Yes. All right. Well," he goes, "Well, I'm just going to put this into fireman terms." Okay. He goes, "I want you to imagine that you are in an apartment building on the third floor. And let's say that you're up there with a little baby. You got a couple kids, and there's nobody else at home. It's just you and the kids. And these kids are small, so they're not able to defend themselves. And let's say that there's a fire burning on the first and second floors, and you're up on the third floor, and you need to get out. And two fire trucks show up, one on each side. The first one shows up, and it is an absolute beautiful machine. It's polished, it's gleaming. The people are jumping out of the equipment in their pressed uniforms. Everything's beautiful. And you're looking out and you're thinking, "Oh, thank God, help is here." And then seconds later, this other apparatus arrives, and it looks completely opposite of what the first one was. It's banged up. It looks like it hasn't been in the car and been washed in probably a couple years. The people do not have pressed uniforms. They're dirty. They're scruffy. Their shirts are hanging out of their pants. They've got their helmets askew. The first engine is trying to figure out how to get the ladders off the machine, off their fire truck. The second one is already running towards the building with the ladders, and they're hooking up the fire hose to the hydrant. And you're looking at this scene and you're saying, "Who is going to save me? Who do you have your trust in?" And he goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "Dad, I get your point. I get the point. The point is that you're saying that these street smart people are the ones that are going to save the day. And I don't disagree with that. They've got the experience. They've been to the rodeo many, many times. They know how to get me out of the building. Get it?" I said, but these other people may not have that street smart savvy, but they may know better technique than these guys do. And if they are so stuck and this is the way we've always done it, they will never have the advantage over here. I said, so wouldn't it be great if I could say both of them play a role in getting me out of the building? And he said, this is why we're sending you to college, Karen. This is why we're sending you to college. And and I don't know if he actually intended that to be the outcome, but that's where I ended up in that conversation, and I've thought about that ever since, is that because it's never one or the other. It's best when you meet in the middle, where you can take all of the new thinking, the new technology. Maybe it hasn't been tested yet. Maybe people are awkward and uncomfortable with it, and they're still making mistakes. And then you've got these people that know it like the back of their hand. When you can marry that up, that's where you have the most beautiful scenarios,
I
I
think
suspect.
that's a fantastic story, and I think it really does reflect my personal experience too. I
Mhm.
think, in fact, one of the things that made it so satisfying for me in that first and the second in-house job
Mhm.
as well was that teamwork.
Yeah.
Um, in my second job, for example, like I was working very closely with a sales team
Mhm.
where almost nobody went to college.
Mm.
I mean, the VP of sales did, but the salespeople didn't, and we learned so much from each other.
Yes.
And I think we respected each other's skills,
Mhm.
and we knew that we were better together than
Apart.
apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because each person could play a really useful role,
Mhm.
and that was really very that was very insightful of you, I have to say, because when as you were relating that story, I it also dawned on me that had my father sat me down and
Mhm.
told me, an anecdote before I went off to college, I know that I would have not been able to understand it or accept it until much later. In fact, he did tell me something that I feel like I only just recently understood. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
56, so it,
Yep.
it took a long time.
Well, as long as you get there, it doesn't.
Right, right. But it's present to me too because there are moments where I'm trying to tell my son certain things, and I realize, I think he won't quite be able to absorb that right now.
Yes. Yes.
But maybe over time he'll
Mhm.
figure that out.
Mhm.
And I have to be patient
Yeah.
about that.
Or you find different ways to position it, that you give him bite-sized chunks as opposed to the whole tome of information, and you tie it back into something that's really relevant in his life so that it stands out, and I think that whole connection between the learning and the experience that's something that we're kind of missing right now, that we're not making the ends meet when we're helping people understand things. I mean, in the corporate environment especially, coming from a banking environment, and I know that you are in a semi-regulated industry. You're not quite there yet. You may end up being in the banking proposition, but for me, I can just remember so many things, so many rules, so many regulations on how you have to do this and how you have to do that. And at the time when you're learning all of this, it's going in one ear and out the other. And if you're a manager trying to teach people this stuff, it's really frustrating because there's huge risk when somebody doesn't play the game the right way. And so for me, the challenge was trying to look at the mistakes that had happened and using that as the learning platform as opposed to here's the rule, this is what you need to do. Instead, what I found great success with was here's a scenario. Let's take a look at this. Would anybody in their right mind want to be in that scenario? No. So let's unwind this and see how this actually happened. So almost in a Hollywood way where the movies start out with the end and then they go all the way back to the beginning. I found that to be very effective with people. Have you used that type of technique? I know you work a lot with people and you are constantly sharing and helping them along. What techniques do you do to get your advice and your insight, whether it's personal career advice or something really technical, like "Don't press that button," type of thing?
Well, I mean, before I even tackle that, I have to say that uh, I do feel like the current work environment is really tough
Yes.
for the current generation. Um, they really generally have come up in an environment where uh, the stakes felt higher.
Mhm.
Um, you know, the the downsides of failing seemed greater,
Yeah.
and the drive to achieve consistently and early were much more acute.
Mhm.
I mean, I felt those pressures myself, but when I look back, it was almost a laughably um, gentler environment in some
Yeah, a
ways.
lower key. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and but with that as the backdrop, I mean, I will say that I know what doesn't work well,
Mhm.
and every time I've done this, I tend to feel kind of foolish.
Mhm.
What doesn't seem to work well is when my team members come to me and ask a question, and I immediately feel like I should solve their problem,
Yes, yes, yes,
and
yes.
I analyze things, and
Mhm.
I sort of get onto a soapbox and sort of and talk about it, and then later they'll have to tell me all of the assumed facts that I got wrong about that, and how they had already actually figured out,
Uh-huh.
a lot of things about it, and this
Mhm.
is the way we should go. And so I feel like after having done that a lot, and sometimes still being guilty of that,
Mhm.
the thing that seems to work better in our on our team is if I first just turn the question back to them and say, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
What where have your I know that you're a very careful person, and I know that you're a very thoughtful person. So
Mhm.
tell me where you've already gone in
Yeah.
your thought process about this and what you think the challenges are. So that they can actually have the room to tell me what they're truly thinking.
Sure.
Um and I think that goes for parenting too, is not to
Uh-huh.
jump in and try to solve all
Yeah.
the problems.
Yes, yes, yes. And again, giving people that room to make mistakes is also really hard. It's hard. It's hard because it takes a lot of patience. It takes patience whether again you're in the corporate environment or in your home life. We are living in such a fast-paced environment that we just want to get to the end. So how can I do this quickly?
Right.
And sometimes that quickly, the most expeditious manner is not the right manner. It's
No, no, and it's not often it's not memorable. Like
yes. Mhm.
if you do things really quickly and the result turns out fine, you may not remember what was good about that or what was not so good about it and was only lucky that you got out of there without a problem.
Yes.
I mean, candidly, I really feel like if you look at my resume, it may look like I had a linear progression,
Mhm.
and that every step was building on the other step in some sort of rational way.
Mhm.
But the reality is, it's not like that at all.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things that I really like to impress on my son, as well as team members, is just that things are actually very spiky,
Yes.
bumpy, um, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's how you learn. In fact, for me personally, I've had a lot of failures in my life, um, and those don't end up being that apparent in
Mhm.
the resume, but they were actually the most important things in my
100%.
life. Those are the things I really remember
Mhm.
and that shaped my sense of ethics, um, integrity, uh, mostly by not having lived up to standards that now I feel I really want to.
Mhm.
Um, and also going down a lot of blind alleys. I mean, even in the career, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that the today's generation, it's so hard because I think they hunger so much for a linear
They
progression
do.
and
Mhm.
not to have wasted any moments on those blind alleys. But I feel like that if you didn't have blind alleys, you really couldn't develop your sensibility of what you actually like to do.
That's right. You wouldn't have a point of comparison. The point of comparison is where the value is. If you have nothing to compare it against, I mean, let's think about this. We could be living in absolute utopia. Every day is beautiful. 80 degrees, blue skies, everybody's got enough money, we've got enough to keep ourselves busy. Life is great. But after a while, we would become bored with that.
I
We
think
would
that's
become
right.
bored with that.
Yep.
And we would seek out other ways to disrupt that, even though that is perfect. It would be disrupted. And the sad piece of that is that it takes that disruption to understand the value of what you had. So, you don't know what is it that they say, you don't know what you have until it's gone, right? That is true. If everything is over here and you have no outside perspective or context to compare it against, it just looks normal. It's taken for granted.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think, and it's funny because when I was growing up, I remember there were some really popular nighttime soap operas
Mhm.
where the main premise is that the idle rich are really unhappy,
Yes, yes, yes.
and and then later, you know, I heard this adage that really struck a chord with me, which was no matter how successful you are, you're going to find problems in your life.
Mhm.
Make sure they're really big problems.
Yes,
Big meaning actually important problems to solve.
exactly.
Like not, oh, is there a
There
scratch on my Rolls Royce
Yeah,
that's really annoying?
there's a smudge on the salt and pepper
Yeah,
shakers. How
yeah.
terrible. Yeah, or they're lined up on the table the wrong way. And that again, if you don't know, if you have lived in a world where people have helped shaped that perspective, you don't know to actually cherish those moments, cherish that dip as a learning opportunity. And in the workplace, I think that's one of the responsibilities of leadership right now. In whether you're at a supervisory, manager, director, senior executive role, all along the way, we have to be in a place where we encourage this generation, this next group that's coming in, that that it's okay to make a mistake. Now, mistakes, nobody likes them, okay? But they're a necessary way of learning. And most people, and there's some exceptions here, so I'll footnote that. But most people, when they make a mistake, are not making a malicious mistake. They're making a mistake because they don't know any better.
Well,
Or
I look, when I was a young associate, I remember my friends and colleagues,
yeah,
we all had this completely skewed mindset. We thought that any little mistake, even something like a typo
yes,
in a
hmm
memo, was going to get us fired, right? But as a manager today, nobody gets fired for that sort of mistake or even larger mistakes. But I think you get fired if you just don't learn
yeah.
from
Or
your
or
mistakes.
or if you try to hide it. I mean,
Yeah,
the hiding, and the blaming others,
right.
the lack of accountability, all of those things. Those are the things that reflect inside. So to be able to say, I did this, I need to do it better next time, and to figure out how you're going to actually execute against that. That's the end goal. And to all the things that we've talked about in this time together, that memorable moment. Nobody likes to be in that place. Nobody wants to be in that place of having to say, "Yeah, it was me. I did it." No, nobody wants that. And because that is a painful, uncomfortable experience, the likelihood of you sticking in your head is so much greater than if it just got swept under the rug. Like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll fix it. Don't worry about it." And I'm not saying that you have to belabor every single mistake. But we do have to recognize when we're not on our game, and to be able to talk about it as a way to learn.
I think that's completely right. In fact, I feel like I uh unfortunately am one of those people who sometimes needs to lose something permanently
Mhm.
in order to really learn from it,
Yeah.
and to really have paid a price.
Mhm.
That makes it extremely real.
Mhm.
Um, but I agree that people shouldn't be afraid of those prices that you pay. I mean, by the time you're, in my stage of a career, you're probably more like that beat up fire truck, right?
Yes, exactly.
But those scars of those battles
They
are
mean something.
important. Yeah.
Mhm. They mean something. They mean something. So I wanted to touch on one last thing that you brought up, which I think, again, for the audience is really important, regardless of where they're at in their career. And that is this whole idea of the trajectory. It's very rare that someone starts and just climbs the mountain without any interruptions or deviations. And so that's the first fallacy. But the second fallacy that I found myself talking a lot about was this idea of the lateral move, where you may not be going up, but you're going across. And that lateral positioning widens your base, increases your foundation, provides more insight and context for you to be able to actually do a better job when you get up to this next level. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think that's really a fantastic point. I mean, I I reflect back on my career where I started in a very generalist role in my
Mhm.
first couple of in-house jobs. So I would, for example, be not only doing commercial contracts,
Mhm.
I would also be managing litigation and counseling employment law matters or complying with environmental regulations. And though that the breadth of that was really helpful, I
Mhm.
think, in creating a foundation for what I do now. Now I'm focused entirely on the commercial contracting and deal making
Mhm.
aspect. But because a lot of the provisions in your contracts, they touch on what would happen, what kind of litigation would
That's
ensue,
right.
or what
Mhm.
what are some of the liabilities and other problems if things go wrong. Having had some general practice in those areas helps inform me on what the contract should say or how we should think about those issues in the contractual context.
Sure.
And so I think, being able to telescope back and forth between the broad and the narrow
Mhm.
is really, really helpful. I think the other thing that strikes me, and this is a bit of a tangent, is
Mhm.
um, thinking again about today's generation. I'm not at all advocating that somebody go through the career progression the way I did, which was
Mhm.
rather without a plan and kind of depending entirely on serendipity and
Yes.
luck, as well as relationships. But
Uh-huh.
but but I think that maybe today's generation is a little bit over indexed on the opposite.
Mhm.
A lot of planning, a
Yes.
lot of frustration if the plan doesn't
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 work.
work,
Yes. Mhm.
or if it's not working at the cadence that they thought it
Mhm.
should. I actually remember distinctly many years ago there was a very junior person on the team, and I asked them to do a particular project, and they said, I'm not really interested in that. That's just not
Too
probably going to
it
progress my
it
career.
it's too junior. It's too
Yeah.
junior for me.
And I
Yeah.
thought to myself, it's incredible. As a junior person, it never would have occurred to me to say no to that project. I was always, you know,
Whatever you could do.
whatever you could do. I mean,
I
look,
am I am I am so
yeah,
aligned with you. And almost so getting back to that idea of balance. So this is not a balanced response. So I can remember in the early part of my career and even to the very end of my structured time, I always felt it was a compliment, an honor to be asked to do something because that meant that somebody trusted me enough to get it done. And and compare that as the similar to the situation that you shared. being in environments, you know, in the second half when I was leading people, where I'd ask someone to well, I would expect someone actually to step up to do it, and then you'd have to ask, and they'd look at like, "Why am I doing that?" Let somebody else do that. That's it's too simple, too basic, whatever it would be for me. And I think, I don't think I would have reacted that way. Now, is there a happy medium? Do you need to
I was just gonna
there's a
say,
happy medium here.
what I really appreciate about the theme really
Yes.
of a lot of what you say is that we need to have a balance,
Balance,
right? And
balance.
I look back and my reaction as a junior person was it was very inauthentic. Like
Mhm.
for example, if typically the partner at the firm would say at 4 p.m. on Friday, "Would you like to do this over the weekend and send it to me on Monday morning by 9?" And my response was always 100%.
100%.
Yeah. And that's not an authentic response, right?
No.
Um, on the other hand, I don't think it makes much sense to just outright reject projects either. I think that cuts you off from learning.
But hold on. I'm going to this is very important because in the beginning, when you're in one of those roles where you are aligned, you're clicked, you're in the zone, okay? And someone asks you to do something like that, you actually want to do it. You want to do it. It's like, yes, yes, yes. But you can only do that for so long because after a while, what happens is your enthusiasm for doing that kind of extraordinary thing goes away. And while that's waning, you've set an expectation with everybody else that that's the standard. So when it becomes the standard, that's where I started. Personally, I would struggle, and I'd see people that worked for me would struggle with it too, and I'd have to give them permission to say, "Look, when you feel that this isn't fun anymore, you have to say something because I'm not going to know any different.
Right,
I don't
right,
know what's going on in your head.
right.
You used to like doing this. Now you don't. Okay, that's fine. Just you have to let me know this. I'm asking you to do something extraordinary. If you want to do it, that's great. And if you don't, be honest because there's somebody else that does. There's always somebody else that does.
Well, that's right. I mean, and I think that for me at least, the times when I was okay with doing
Mhm.
that sort of work was when I felt like the more senior person did take into account
Yes.
my life and
Yes.
what would be reasonable to ask
Yes,
someone
yes,
to
yes.
do, um, and allowed me to go with the positive aspects of my mentality towards the project. And I think the positive aspects are, um, I get the most satisfaction out of doing these projects when I'm able to exercise my intellectual
Yes.
curiosity
Mhm.
and a desire to help.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
If I understand who I'm helping and why, that
That
helps
makes a
make it much
difference.
more meaningful.
Yeah.
And when I think that there's somebody on the other end who is interested
Yeah.
in the
Where it's
analysis.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a purpose. It's purposeful and it means something. Well, Daryl, we could talk for another couple hours, I suspect, but you have to go back to Google and I have to go catch a plane. So we're going to have to close it here. But if the opportunity presents itself, would you be willing to come back?
Oh, absolutely. It was a real
Okay.
pleasure
Well,
chatting
good.
with you.
Wonderful. For anyone that might want to reach out to talk with you, what would be the best way? Through LinkedIn or
Yeah, through LinkedIn. I'm always available. Love to, help and meet new people.
great. Well, the people that are on your team are lucky. They're very lucky. And I think you're lucky to have a great team working for you too. So God
I
bless
am
you.
very lucky.
Yeah. All right. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.